English language teaching under the covers.
Hello, welcome back to ELT Under the Covers English Language Teaching, or Teachers Under the Covers, should I say. Today we are going to be looking at something fun and interesting as we visit Russia and English teachers coming out of Russia. Remember, in this show, this React show, we actually watch clips of teaching from different countries and we react as English language teaching professionals because that's what we are. So let's introduce ourselves. I am Neil, teacher of Team Teachers fame, and I am joined by the crispy. I beat you to it. Crispy Chris, sometimes known as the Rough and Ready Rich. I don't know who we're gonna get today. We'll find out.
Rough, ready.
Relentless English language teaching methodology. In a world where English teaching methodology needs to be reformed.
Hello. Here
Oh,
we are.
I like that. Rich the Reformer. Oh, Reformer.
You can't really, the thing is, I think anyone who tries
They
to
keep
call
on
himself
running.
a reformer before they reform anything is just a dick.
Yeah, but
you can only really be called a reformer after you've done the reform. I am a reformer.
Yeah, but maybe it's not like a reformer in like changing the institutional and the systems and the way of it. Maybe it's just like reform, as in you're taking something that's gold and turning it shit. just in a different form.
Yeah, I guess there's many ways that you could reform something.
Look, I made a balloon out of
It was a gourmet meal.
Now it's an empty plate.
Yeah. Speaking of taking gold and turning it into shit, I wonder what the teaching's going to be like today.
Hey, I see what you did there. It's always golden on here. We're at the end of the rainbow, the rich rainbow, rainbow rich. That's another way to go with. I need to write this stuff down.
That's a top tip, by the way. Anyone who does any classroom observations, in the feedback, good way of delivering feedback is like what you did. The material was gold. You turned it into shit. And then, when you were down the job seekers office, that's what happens to me. By the way, that's why I went self-employed.
I think you could probably get away with it if you became the Jeremy Clarkson of like the English teaching world.
Oh man, I love Clarkson. He's,
I don't like it.
English language teacher.
I hate it. Oh wait, no, he's supposed to say I don't like it. I love it. No, I don't like it. I hate it.
He's also spawned one of the most popular memes at the moment, hasn't he?
Oh, what is that?
Is oh no. Anyway, you haven't seen that one?
No, I've not.
Oh man, that one's super popular. Oh no. Anyway, yeah, people doing that all the time now. Anyway.
Oh, I can imagine people doing that in the English teaching classroom. Oh, you didn't get it? Oh no. Okay, next point.
So what are we watching, Neil?
So today, what we are watching are clips all coming out from the motherland of Russia. We have a couple of viral clips.
Slav.
Yeah.
Slav.
So Slav. We're just slaving it on that toast, English teaching toast.
Slathering at the thought.
Taxi. Oh no. Anyway. So we're going to look at these different clips, mostly from sketch shows, some actually from Russian sketch shows, but the first one that we're going to look at today is kind of Russian, kind of not. It's touching on this idea, this practice that, I don't think we've talked about so much before, is when you have non-native English speakers teaching English, but posing as native English speakers.
This, by the way, is a huge polemic, and I'll go into the sort of details of that a little bit later.
Good.
Even the word native, when used as in terms of English language teachers, receives a lot of criticism from the kind of linguistic academics, and it is trickling down a bit.
Mhm.
But obviously, in the actual market, it still holds a lot of weight, and that might even be part of the problem why we see this kind of stuff. But anyway, we should probably take a look at it first.
Yeah, we'll look at this, and we can kind of see what we can derive from that, and then maybe go a bit more into this idea after as well. But let's cue that up.
Hello, students of my class. I'm English teacher, Mr. Dennis Jones. I'm a friendly, likable man, and you will feel safe to ask many questions. Don't believe in stupid questions, only crashing girls, stupid people. Relax, pupils. We will have many funny moments together. Mr. John, yes. How about we start with some questions? Cece, what is favorite color?
My favorite color is red.
Well done.
Spelling. Look at this spelling.
I like red. Reds are taking over. Okay. Tony,
My favorite color, blue.
well said, my main man. Mr. John,
Hello，你好，I'm fine，谢谢。
okay, sounds like somebody likes green. Really? What color makes your favorite?
Infant Kate or Isabelline?
Okay, move on. Your favorite food?
Very good.
As Canadian, my favorite food, pizza.
Mm.
Listen, little girl. Don't have to hide. We are making the English.
Mr. Jones, actually, I think you could teach us parenthetical statements.
See, you're smart, Alex.
But I just
No, you just nothing. You want to learn about parent identical.
parenthetical statements.
Yes, but today's class is about favorite color and favorite food. We cannot fall into disorder and talk about just anything. This is how wars are started.
But we always talk about favorite things.
Not true. We also talk about least favorite food.
My least favorite food is burgers.
Perfect. Cece, you are a great student.
Mr. Jones,
Tony,
I like hamburger.
least favorite, Tony. Least favorite.
My least favorite food is hamburger.
Very good.
Teacher Jones, what is a positive?
Should we dive in for a bit?
Yeah, let's dive in for a bit.
Alright. Okay. Yeah, so there's quite a lot. Quite a lot I've got off.
They nailed it. They've nailed
I have.
this fantastic sketch. The Mama who the Chinese, the guys from China that produced it are absolutely hats off.
Well, the first thing I'd say is I don't think, for me, this doesn't have a lot to do with the non-native issue. Actually,
Hmm.
it makes it kind of funny that the guy's Russian. But really, the
Could have been any. Didn't it have to be Russian?
The skit really is that he's a teacher who's just kind of, I don't know, just kind of flying by the seat of his pants and not really,
Yeah.
just getting through the lesson. He's kind of chilled out, He's riding on his charisma because he obviously has a bit of charisma, right?
Yeah.
And he's sort of getting through it like that. Doesn't know how to spell that word, and sort of, I think a lot of us as teachers can probably relate to what he did there. I've definitely had those moments where I'm like, hey, how do you spell this exactly? And then you just kind of do something so you don't have to write it. Or you somehow like sneak a peek at the computer at the right moment, like, yes, okay, very good. It's always kind of jarring though, isn't it? Because you're like making a list and then someone says something, and then it's like, yes, okay, right, okay, so in twos, 5 minutes to talk about this, and then as soon as they go that, you're like on the computer, dictionary.com. I mean, can any English teacher, it's not a spelling bee, is it?
No, it's not.
Can anyone spell every single word in the English language correctly all the time? You know what I mean?
No.
I remember even, I had an observation once well, let's not go into details, but let's say that the guy who did the observation had a bit of a peculiar reputation, and I misspelled. I think it was becoming. I think I spelled becoming with 2 M's,
Huh?
which is obviously it's a stupid mistake, right? But he got quite upset about that in feedback, and I think looking back, and even then I didn't think much of it, but looking back, I just think like it's not really a massive deal.
It's
You know what I
low
mean?
hanging fruit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's just a mistake, isn't it? It's not
Yeah.
actually being a bad teacher or doing anything bad pedagogically. You know what I mean? It's,
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, any of the students in the class can look it up on their mobile phone in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So obviously it's something we try to avoid because it potentially causes the students to sort of lose faith in the teacher.
Yeah.
So before you've sort of established yourself with them as a kind of teacher that they can trust,
Mhm.
as being knowledgeable in the subject and is not going to lead them astray.
Mhm.
At that point, obviously, maybe students will be a bit more forgiving with those kind of mistakes. But yeah, I mean, I could definitely relate to that bit. And then this other thing is, I mean, we've got a big thing that's going on is his failure to address the differentiation in the class, which is this student, what's her name, Lily or something?
Yeah.
Is at the most ridiculously high level. I mean, I actually don't know what parenthetical statements are. I don't know. Is that like when you use parentheses?
I think maybe.
Like brackets?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure either.
I'm having a guess. Yeah, I'm having a guess that that's what it means. It's not something I've ever come across in 12 years of
When
teaching.
to use them within a sentence when writing? I don't know. Could be.
I mean, I could come up with stuff with that if that's what they are, if they
Yeah.
are brackets. But like I say, I haven't heard them referred to as
But
parenthetical.
here's another
So-
question for you. So, say you had this student that said, "Oh, I would like to talk about this," and I've had that before, and what I've done is I've always said, I've always asked other students if they would be interested in that, and then I can kind of go home and research it, and then do a lesson based on that, kind of like based on an emergent language, but not dealt with at that moment. Otherwise, I'll see if I can put together some sort of little package that they can do, that I can kind of go over with them at break time, and they can self-study with. But what about you? How would you normally, or how have you dealt with something like that?
I like that way of doing it. That sounds good. I mean, in terms of like directing, it's very rare in a group class that I will allow one student to sort of direct the syllabus in that way.
Yeah.
I think I've always kind of thought that it's up to the teacher to be the guide there, and although students might make certain requests, I mean, for me, the side of students making requests is people asking stuff relevant on the spot in the classroom, like you're covering something and then someone says, "Oh, but I just don't get, I always find the intonation difficult to get, blah blah blah," and then maybe you go on a little, like you go off piste for 5 minutes onto that. So it's like that emergent question, emergent language thing. Like that's what I'm comfortable doing. But when it comes to actually a custom lesson focus, I do that now sometimes, but all my classes at the moment are 1-to-1. So I think it lends itself to that possibility. But in a group class, yeah, it's not something in particular I do. If a student does ask, let's take this example for the parenthetical statements. If someone says what is a parenthetical statement, and I don't know, then I can quite happily say, oh, parenthetical statements. I'm actually not too sure about that. I'll get back to you on it. And then you can, and I remember actually early in my teaching career having to do that quite a few times, because obviously there's a lot of things that you don't know when you first start. And students don't mind, but the way I used to deal with it is I normally wouldn't spend class time on it. It'd just be a quick, like at the start of the next lesson, it'd just be like, oh, that thing, it's this, boom, boom, boom. Rather than like really going into it or whatever. Like I said, I prefer to reserve that for things that you as a teacher judge to be relevant to the class, and they're coming up, sort of emerge. They're coming up on the spot based on that. The other thing to be said about that as well is like, obviously, as a teacher gets more experienced and you get more to sort of the, the Scott Thornbury dogme style teacher that he envisaged, then theoretically you should be able to do a lot of that stuff on the spot.
Yeah.
Obviously, with parenthetical statements, it'd be a bit difficult if you didn't know what it was. But as long as you know what it is, the idea is that you can diverge from whatever you had in mind for the lesson to something else, and kind of actively, creatively come up with activities and ways of engaging with that with the students without necessarily having materials prepped and stuff like that. That's almost the dogme ideal, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's something I think that primarily comes with experience and time.
Oh, definitely. You have to reach that certain Super Saiyan level, though, where you suddenly like, oh, okay, I've got the power to just change everything. But it does come from deliberate, not just experience. It has to be deliberate practice and deliberate experience. Because I've known plenty of teachers that have been 10 years and are still like this guy, just like, let's look at this flashcard and run to the other side of the room. That's
the same thing with anything, though, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's like any skill you're going to, it needs that focus and interest and motivation and all the rest of it. Same for the students learning the language, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you get people who just go through the motions again and again and again, and then they've been learning English for 25 years, and they're still at like pre-intermediate level or something, which does that kind of stuff does happen, doesn't it? And it's
yeah. Because they rock up to the classroom, sit down, and switch off, and it's gonna seep in. If you've done something for 25 years, there'll be something there, but it's not at the level that it should be at, basically.
What you tend to find is that they can be like quite fluent with very basic vocabulary, but they always make loads of mistakes, and it's always the same mistakes, and they come up again and again and again and again, because there's no reflection or like active engagement.
There's so much to do with
watching can sort of relate the kind of pictures of students are now forming in their head, but I've had a few of them, and they definitely do come into the same type, and it's really tough.
It's really difficult to teach.
Yeah, it is. Because I always feel like, what are they really getting out of this? But they're perfectly happy. They think that the magic switch is going to happen at some point.
When they learn something new, when it's rather than they need to either unlearn something or just reflect and practice what the teacher's asking them, if they're a good teacher.
Well, the other thing is they lean heavily on external motivation. So they lean heavily on, for example, normally this kind of person is learning it out of necessity, like for their work or something like that. And they lean heavily on, in the classroom, the teacher-led motivation. So it's the teacher going, yeah, that's it. Or every time they make a mistake, that kind of thing. And they're really like playing into that. And when you really hammer that home, that on the spot correction with them, then things can start to change. But it takes a lot of effort for the teacher, and also they're not taking that outside the classroom because they don't have someone there going like, yeah, is it feast or first? Feast or first? You know, every time they try to say that word, you know.
It actually, you know, a lot of the, you know, that kind of relationship very much reminds me of the, I was going to say therapeutic, but counseling relationships. You know, because I've got a little bit of a background with that. In that, what, you know, like if you're talking with a person, or even if you're doing something, you know, kind of hypnosis-y like NLP, your neuro-linguistic programming, what you're trying to do is you're trying to do like what's called a pattern interrupt. So if someone's got perpetually, you know, these negative thoughts going on, you're trying to find chinks in the armor to kind of open that up and interrupt it so that you can get them on a different course. And I feel it's very similar to language teaching in that when they've got these same mistakes, and if you're the teacher there, you can interrupt them and, you know, do that on the spot fix, and maybe it stays, or maybe it's lost, but you have to repeat it class after class, correcting that same mistake. But the ideal that we're both talking about is we want to move to, you know, self-reflection, in that they notice the patterns that they have, and the patterns that they're wrong and have been pointed out by their teacher, and they actively are consciously, deliberately practicing the correct way to break that pattern. But you know, in the same way as negative thoughts, as with language, it's very difficult, especially if it's entrenched and you've been one of those people that have just turned up for 25 years to the class and not really, you know, been active.
Yeah, and you're leaning on the teacher for that like corrective role, and then, you know, that's where all this stuff comes in about learning autonomy and, you know, focusing on learning autonomy. But it requires, you know, participation from the student, doesn't it? You can only do so much.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's if you're kind of you're not being a teacher per se, but you're also being kind of like almost like a parental figure, in that you're trying to guide them into some sort of language maturity, and especially learning maturity. But you know, I think that's another thing with classrooms as well. You have different levels of languages, but you have different maturity levels, both in terms of development, but also in terms of, you know, learning, because learning is a skill.
Yeah, and another point. Oh, there we go. That was me clearing my throat.
I thought you were just trying out Klingon again.
Really it's the ASMR moment for my ASMR fans out there. So, what the hell was I talking about? Oh yeah. So this thing. So I think partly something else that's relevant to the idea of that sort of student relying heavily on that teacher figure being there, providing the entertainment. You crank that up to the max. So if you crank that up to 900%, what you get is this kind of, you know, it's your English class fix, right? It's almost like you're coming there then for the teacher as entertainer figure, because that whole thing of the teacher being the corrector, the rewarder, the one that's entirely steering your English language learning, because, you know, you don't have the internal pride and motivation to take control of it yourself. Take that to the ultimate extent, and you get this kind of opiate of the English student, right? To quote Marx. So this guy here is like almost an epitome of that, right? He's coming in. He's got the, hey guys, you know, oh, color red, nice one. oh my man, that's the green, right? The guy in the business suit there, just on his phone, just doesn't give a, whatever. Maybe his company's paying for the class, and for him it's just a lunch break. He doesn't give a damn, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way this guy's trying to run the class, right? It's just like, yeah, nice one, cool. Here's your social validation from Mr. Kind of chilled out teacher.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he doesn't then tell them a little story about something. Oh wow, I saw this thing the other day, and blah blah. Become like the kind of pseudo stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm coining that term, by the way, the opiate of the English student. It's gonna be in my book. The what could I call it? The Linguistics Manifesto.
I'm sure we'll put it on a t-shirt at some point as
Crispy
well.
Chris.
I don't like the way that Crispy Crisp is leaning right now.
That's my pen name.
But yeah, where going back to the actual sketch and the video and the teacher, it's when we're saying that this is a Russian teacher, I don't think this is anything to do with the guy being Russian for being a poor teacher. I think it's just that he's a poor teacher. Yes, his English is a little bit broken, and we'll talk about that later. But maybe after this clip. But
Okay. Yeah.
it's not necessarily the main issue with what we're watching.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll come back to that point. Let's see what he's got to do next.
For example, an appositive is a noun or noun phrase which sits next to another noun to rename it or describe it differently.
Canada, we have seen. The man who was born is the man starting France.
For example, the man hiding in plain sight is clearly visible.
You are clearly visible.
Mr. Jones, which part of Canada did you say from again?
Fun Giant, what is your least favorite food?
I like noodles.
Very good.
你说什么？
说我喜欢面条。
我们是来这儿学英语的，你知道吗？你为什么能说？老师，他 OK 了吗？
他 OK 了吗？
Who's that supposed to be his
Tommy.
mother?
We say, I eat KFC.
Could that even theoretically really be his mother? I don't know. Like, I know there's always this stereotype of how, East Asian women don't look their age or something, but she looks like the same age as him. to me.
No, it could be like one of those. It's his wife, and
Oh,
like
really?
he's an under the thumb husband. It could be
Okay.
something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
It's a weird dynamic, whatever it is.
I eat KFC.
Красавец! We make a good team. Perhaps you can introduce me to boss?
Yeah.
Okay, busy man. I like it. Mr. John,
Hello, how are you? 谢谢。
that was very good, Mr. John. Lily, what is your favorite food?
My favorite food is Cullen skink, a specialty of Northeast Scotland. I went on vacation there last week. It's wonderful. If you ever go, I recommend you try rumple thumbs. Delicious. Mr. Jones, what is an appositive?
Little girl wants to know what is a positive. Okay. We talk about positives relating to history of Canada.
The what of Canada?
The history of Canada.
Are you saying history? History?
History.
跟着念。
Yesterday.
History.
Is that Canada speak? What is history?
We are all saying same word. History. History. Say it.
It's pronounced history.
History.
Not history. History.
History.
Wow, it's like standing on the streets of Ottawa. 怎么回事？
听不懂，老师加拿大口音太重了。
就是因为你不好好学习，看我今天晚上不能受吃。
Some serious domestic abuse going on here.
Using positives is. Oh, the positive of history of Canada is. The thing about Canadian history using positives is. The positive of history of Canada is. It's very good country and all of history is positive. They had positive when independence of war and following peace good for all happy citizens of Canada. Thank you all. We've accomplished a great deal here. You are all growing like flower in front of eye. Next week class we will talk about the Big Bang theory and who is favorite handsome person.
Hey, bro, you have good teaching today?
Oh yes, very cool, bro. How's the shit with you, man?
Bro, you gotta get that money, bro. It's very important. My next class, but later we have to watch the game together, bro.
For sure. We will watch American game.
Yes.
Just like my days at Harvard.
Harvard was the time of my lifetime.
For sure, bro.
Cowabunga, bro.
See you.
His level of English and his ability to teach English with that level of
So
English.
the reason why I wanted to sort of preface this with a cautionary, I don't even know what to call it, disclaimer or something.
disclaimer alert.
Is that it is something that people will get, sand in their armpits about, which is that it's this idea of sort of playing up the native as an English teacher and sort of and claiming that there's something special about that. Now, I'm playing devil's advocate on behalf of the academics here, that they will say, first of all, what a native is somewhat hard to define, and if you, how do you define that? Like, for example, English is a national language of India, so are they also a native in that framework? Are they as native as a British person? Is someone who speaks Indian English in any way different from someone who speaks what is British English? Is someone from Scotland, do they speak British English? Do Scousers speak British English? What exactly are we talking about? And this is all about standards and where you draw the line, isn't it? It's like linguistic standards are completely they don't actually exist. They're just things that we invent in our head. We invent the so-called grammar, the so-called rules, the so-called way of spelling something, which, by the way, spelling didn't have any kind of standardization for the vast majority of human history. It's only in modern history that we've had any kind of spelling standardization. The first dictionary, I think, was written, I think, about 300 years ago? I think it was Oxford or Cambridge, wasn't it, who did the first English dictionary. So before that, there was no reference for how you would spell a word. So, of course, people would just write it in the way that they thought it was said, in pretty much every language, I imagine. So a lot of the standards that we have in language are kind of modern and invented. And what you find is that the countries that were more disposed towards an outward-looking kind of globalized view, globalization really, are the countries who speak the languages which have spread like wildfire. And one of the reasons for that is how with this kind of centralization of power and influence spreading throughout the globe, you can get a very strongly standardized language, and English is probably one of the most strongly standardized languages in the world. That we have a whole load of so-called rules about how to speak it. We have got a whole load of people all over the world telling people how to speak it. And And therefore, we actually have, in many ways, although we also have the largest potential for like divergence and diversity in the language, which you'll see everywhere. You see it as natives living abroad, and you see it as non-natives mixing with non-natives, saying things, inventing their own ways of saying stuff. I remember living in Spain when people used to say stuff like, I haven't got ganas to do that, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You start mixing in things.
Yeah.
And you could easily see how, like, a pocket of English language teachers living in Spain in a couple of decades could easily start developing all kinds of new vocabulary and all sorts of stuff. But we also have the most global and one of the strongest forms of standardization of the language, and also motivation to have standardization because people want to actually be able to communicate with each other. So there's two very conflicting things going on there, and that also is a massive argument in English language teaching and linguistics about like how much the language should be allowed to sort of evolve and adapt, how it should be standardized, whether it should be whether it should be the natives that get to standardize it. And this is where the kind of almost the English teachers' social justice movement sort of comes into play, where it's like, well, the language, there's more non-native speakers than native speakers, so really they own the language. And it's like, look, I see where you're coming from, and I agree that, like, just because Oxford's been going for 300 years, why should they have all the fun? I get that, but also it is what the vast majority of students want. And then I think they would then turn around and say, well, yeah, that's because of the way the system is. But then we get into arguments that I don't want to get into. It's pragmatically what the situation actually is. And from my perspective, and I've had this conversation with many students, they want a standard. They don't want you to tell them, oh, if you don't want to do the third person S, you don't have to do it, because it's a very common mistake with non-native speakers. No, they want to speak English well. They want the model, and they'll tell you that they want the model, and they'll tell you again and again and again. I haven't seen that attitude change just yet, and I don't think it ever will. I think there'll always be an idea of wanting that standardization, and that's where the advantage of being a native, whatever that means, and I'm not going to try and define it, linguistics, that wherever that idea of being comes in, you're the one who can provide a model very naturally. Not that a non-native can't do it, but it's harder, and especially when you've got that guy's level of English, whatever. Well, to be honest, his level of English didn't seem that bad to me, but he had kind of a thick accent, didn't he? Which might not help him if someone is not particularly predisposed to wanting to learn.
Yeah, but even if you have, for example, I've known British teachers that have gone to teach English, and this accent has evolved drastically from when I was younger. I mean, you can go back to when I was a kid, and it was never really that broad, but I had the Yorkshire accent, but I learned over time and from my degree to really kind of enunciate and speak to better be understood by everyone. I knew a teacher that had been teaching for 3 years and had like a strong Lancashire accent, and he was like, la pape. Oh, I can't even do it anymore. But it just didn't sound like English at all.
I remember when I went to Canada when I was 21 or 22, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember like ordering a glass of water at a bar, and I could not get the barman to understand what I wanted. It took forever. He didn't understand when I said water. I was like,
water.
Could I get a glass of water?
Yeah.
He's like, what? Water.
Yorkshire would be like, water.
And I didn't understand why he didn't understand that.
Yeah.
Because that was just the way I always said it. So I was like, water, and it was obviously, it was dropping the T thing. It was the water. Oh, because when he finally got it, he was like, oh, water.
Yeah.
You want water. Well, that's two natives saying something totally differently, isn't it?
Exactly.
So that's where the problem of native comes in, but also you could then argue, well, we still have RP as a standardization,
Mhm.
but then people say, well, why should everyone have to, isn't that just snobbery, the argument goes on.
Well, the pushback to that is the need for standardization at the highest level. For example, when you're going and you're doing something like the Geneva Convention, or you're doing international contracts, or you're doing technical language, or writing even for product descriptions, your language needs to be concise, universal, because if you get that one word wrong, that could mean that this country is could possibly get away with using certain weapons that they couldn't, or the trade is imbalanced or something. So at the highest level, it's extremely important for someone that's trying to just go and live in Canada, and they've got they're going to be working retail or something like that. It doesn't need to be at that level, but sometimes it does feel that way when you're doing the standardized testing, when you're doing Cambridge or IELTS or something like that. So often it's at ridiculous level. When I even know native speakers that wouldn't pass the IELTS, where everything that they write is like a text message, and they don't need to write. And you will have some English teachers look down on that as well. Well, but then what is their need for that?
No, I understand that. I mean, a lot of English kids now have problems spelling because English is not easy to learn how to spell. But then you can these days, you just got your spell check on your phone or on Microsoft Word.
Well, I actually think it's there's a broader problem. Sorry, I'm going into a rant now. A broader problem with language learning, and it's not just English language learning, it's language learning of your own native language. I think there's a lack of emphasis on really understanding your own language and really getting into and trying to develop your range and span of vocabulary. It's hugely important. It's hugely important for your psychology and emotional development to be able to accurately express and communicate yourself. And if you're communicating with a person that doesn't have that level as well, it can be increasingly frustrating, because although you can accurately express yourself, maybe they don't understand, and that just leads to conflict. Well, it can possibly lead to conflict. And there's even focused in developmental psychology. When you have kids that are going into school and you have their vocabulary is 2,000 words to this other kid that's had a lot of focused attention from their parents that have got like 5,000 words. It's a massive difference, and it's under the surface. It's like an iceberg, because it allows, you need that foundation for allow to a lot to grow, and it's really interesting as well, because what you find is it's especially with kids, is if it's the kids getting lots of one-on-one time with their parent and their native language, their vocabulary grows exponentially. But it doesn't matter on the level of your status in society or the money that you have. But what interestingly, there was a study, I really wish I could remember it off the top of my head, was these people that are going back to work, parents that are going back to work and leaving them with a caregiver, but also a caregiver that is a non-native speaker of whatever language it is that their parents have. They receive less vocabulary because that person doesn't know as much vocabulary because it's not their native language. Are you following me? So even though this child is probably within quite an affluent family, because they have a caregiver a primary caregiver that's giving them the most attention, because their parents are at work, but is not a native to the language of whatever given language, it actually hurts them in a way, because they
probably not hurts them.
Hurts their,
compared to having their parents as their
which is I found really interesting.
So that was a study, was it?
It was some study. I'll see if I can find it and I'll put it in the post. But yeah,
it's very interesting. Yeah. I mean,
and
it's
that's
really
again a
interesting
case
thing.
for a native teacher in that
Yeah.
there is just much more breadth to the language that they hold within them, even if they maybe aren't aware of it or are not very good at administering that in their teaching.
I
So
totally agree. I think that your range of vocabulary is empowering. I mean, that is the whole George Orwell 1984 thing in Newspeak, isn't it?
mhm,
How they controlled how people thought by not even giving them the possibility of having the words to express, certain concepts that the government didn't want them to have.
Yeah.
And therefore they control, so there was no word for bad. The only way of saying bad was ungood, and slowly you get rid of those things so that people don't have the concepts to be able to really think about them. It does make you think whether, for example, in languages like Spanish, where they have words like ganas and
mhm,
agujetas,
mhm.
which is, the stiffness you get after working out, whether that somehow gives them an advantage in certain areas where they can conceptualize those things and get a grasp on them, whereas English speakers can't quite so much. They have to talk about the stiffness you get when working out. So definitely expansion of vocabulary does definitely give you a better way of dealing with the world, because you can put that label on it. And by the way, I think the thing that you're talking about, and the sad thing about the kind of inequality of the education system, is I think the reason why me and you might not have necessarily got the focus in vocabulary at school that you're sort of talking about is that we can go to private school. And I think probably if you go to private school, you get it. That's why private school kids do tend to have a very wide range of vocabulary.
Well, it's probably smaller class sizes, more individual attention.
No, but not only that, just literally the syllabus. I think part of the syllabus at a private school will put emphasis on expanding the vocabulary of the students.
But that when I was talking about that study, it wasn't anything to do with education system. It was literally to do with the amount of focused attention that they got from a caregiver that was in the language native speaker. Yeah.
That's younger kids, which is that's a different issue.
Yeah.
But my inclination would be, my thought would be, I mean, it's people who go to private school tend to sound very good the way they speak.
Yeah.
They do have a wide range of vocabulary, even if the people using that vocabulary are not particularly intelligent, and that would indicate
to tick that they are in.
Yeah, exactly. It's a way of demonstrating intelligence, isn't it? By coming up with, look at my expansive.
But it doesn't actually equate to intelligence.
No, it doesn't.
Which is so funny.
It hints at it. But it hints at it. I mean, like if you pick up a guitar and you okay, maybe that's a bad example. If you go to a pub quiz,
yeah,
right, and you bang nail the questions, I mean, it gives someone a hint that you might be intelligent, but you might just be someone who's gone to a load of pub quizzes.
Yeah,
there's two sides to it, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the same thing with rhetoric and vocabulary. You could be very intelligent and someone who's picked it up well, or you could be someone who's just had that extra attention. And private schools are very good at teaching people how to appear successful and get, therefore move on and get those positions and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. But kind of going back to this whole non-native speaker English teachers, I don't think I have absolutely no issue with it at all. As, if there's mistakes or something like that, because I mean, there's a certain level, maybe when it's higher up, and it starts to get more important to be more standardized. But lower, when you're kind of going, you're dealing with the basics and the structures of the language, the grammar per se. Many local teachers, it might be beneficial to have a local teacher that can explain it in the local language and then in English, because and they're also more aware of pitfalls and such. So I think there are definite advantages to it, I think it really depends on the goals of the aims of the class and the ones of the goals of the students as well.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely some advantages to being a non-native English teacher. There's no doubt about that. I think it really depends. You know, you can't compare any two teachers, really, can you? There's all kinds of factors to consider. How much someone cares, how much pedagogy you know.
Yeah.
Like, are you a good educator? Do you
Yeah.
know a lot about
Yeah, he was a
education?
shit teacher.
And I think, yeah, that's
But
right.
if he was
That's
a
it.
good teacher
Yeah.
and his English was, you know,
Yeah.
shaky at times, then
Yeah.
we'd be having a very different conversation.
I think the irony is that you can often get non-natives, and the way that they go with it is they kind of try and close off into the linguistic side of things and not go too much into the pedagogical side of things. This is what I saw in Spain a lot. Like a lot of the non-native non-native English teachers who were Spanish people teaching English, they were like really into the linguistics. Like they always had this like degree in philology,
Yeah.
and it was like, you know, it was all about the language and stuff. And it's like I observed a couple of their classes, and their pedagogy was just, you know, it was nothing. And it was almost like for them, if they kind of went into the language teaching world, it would feel like they're giving up the one thing that they have, which is what they can say is, no, I'm really qualified. I've actually got a degree in philology. You're just a native English teacher with a 1 month CELTA course. You know?
Yeah.
But if they then go into that CELTA side of things and allow that to become a thing, you know, then they're going to have people who, in their eyes, are not as qualified, like telling them how to teach. And then they kind of, unfortunately, they sort of sacrifice the side of things where they could really have an advantage over a so-called native, because although they're never gonna have the vocabulary, I mean, it can happen. As a non-native, you can get to a level where you can have a wider vocabulary than a backpacker English teacher, but it's really difficult, even than just a backpacker. You know what I mean? It's gonna be really difficult. But where you can compete is pedagogy, because a backpacker English teacher doesn't have very good pedagogy either.
No.
So then you focus on the pedagogy, become a really good educator, and then you've got the other advantage you talked about, which is that you know what it's like to learn a language, you know what it entails, you know the tricks of the trade, you know the similarities between your language and theirs, right?
Yeah.
And the only native teachers who are going to have that are the ones who have learned the language as well, which is, I say,
And we've espoused it multiple times of how useful it is to
I think it
have
is useful.
at least a broad idea of, you know, how their the language of your students work.
Yeah, and I think actually the representation of language learners in language teachers is quite high. I think a great deal of language teachers do actually make some sort of an effort, but still over 50% of them probably don't speak very much. So they don't really know what it's like. I mean, if you don't really know what it's like to learn a language, I think, you know, I'm not sure if language teachers, that might be a controversial thing to say, right? But I feel like
spicy.
all language teachers should have a real good go at learning languages, because you have to be able to put yourself in the student's shoes. You know, it doesn't have to be their language, even just any language. Just get an idea of what's actually involved in doing it, so you realize how kind of long-term and slow it is. You know, it's a gradual process which requires a lot of continual commitment and motivation.
And reflection outside of the class, just to reaffirm and reiterate what we said earlier.
Yeah, it's all about taking it outside the class, isn't it? The class is just your injection of knowledge, and then you have to go and, you know, win the Super Bowl outside of class.
Yeah, and you know, I really want to hammer home the point that I have with the non-native English speakers teaching English. Like, some of the best lessons that I've observed have been with non-native English speaking teachers, especially with like the young kids, because they've got the pedagogy, they've got that understanding, they've got teaching experience where they're just singing songs. That they're singing songs with the kids. They're doing fun, engaging activities. Maybe their English is not that great. Level wise, it's not very high, but they all just have to kind of make sure that they stick to the material to get the correct structures and the language correct that they're going over, and the students are learning and they're loving it, and especially for the young learners, it trumps any sort of native English speaking teacher that's got no teaching background.
Yeah. I mean, being a good educator is definitely, it's worth more than that. Definitely, more than a native versus let's say a strong B2 level or something like that teacher.
Yeah.
And then with the kids, you've got all kinds of things as well, because you've got all kinds of cultural aspects with the kids. And that's another thing that we haven't talked about either, which would be the non-natives' kind of cultural advantage or disadvantage, depends on how you look at it. Because there's two sides to that coin, isn't there? One is, by being a non-native, you understand thoroughly the culture of the students. So you can identify with them, joke with them, you're less likely to offend them. Whereas, on the other side, you also have this idea that, and I really like this idea, I think it needs to come back in language teaching, which is the idea that the teacher, the native teacher, comes as a kind of a cultural ambassador and a cultural source, and the students, latch onto that and they like that. And I don't know, we've all had this experience, surely, but I remember even in my first teaching job in Spain when I was shit as a teacher, I had no idea how to teach. I was totally winging it, totally just trying to survive class to class, spending ridiculous amounts of time planning or whatever, right? But even then, I still had this thing as a cultural font, and the students liked it. They liked it a lot. They were, oh, England, and tell me about England, and tell me about Liverpool, and tell me, do you remember that? I mean, I remember that. And
even Premier League was
still have that.
a great connector.
Yeah, right. And that is a good thing about it.
I actually think that might be one of the arguments. I think that might be one of the arguments against standardization of English, is that there's too much culture wrapped up within the English language, where maybe there shouldn't or doesn't need to be. In that, we teach a lot of idiomatic language as well, but is that necessary?
But that is part of standardization.
But I think that's where people would be like, I could definitely see the pushback, because if they're saying, oh, you hit a home run with your with this international trade or whatever, why can't we say something that doesn't have that idiomatic, baseball analogy, whatever it is, and have something to say this is fantastic? Could we strip that away? And that's kind of what international English is. And it makes it difficult for native speakers to, sometimes converse within the business English world, international business English world, because they're coming in using all of these idioms. So that's another argument.
The thing is that standardization doesn't necessarily have to be rules that make sense. That might have been an idea at some point. I'm not really sure, in terms of the theory, when that would have changed, but it's definitely the case that now, when people talk about standardization, they're talking about use of English, and they're talking about how English is used with a very, very mild, if anything, part of how it should be used, right? But obviously, you do need some aspect of should, because otherwise, what is RP if not should? and that's what some students want. They want the RP,
Yeah.
right, rather than hey lad, you want to go down the pub for a few bevies? You know?
Mhm.
Which, by the way, I can do that because I'm from there. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just ripping on an area of the country. Is that how it works? If you're like from there, you can do that. So I can do Scouse jokes, but not Irish jokes or something, right?
I mean, there must be, there must be some arguments for kind of stripping away the more cultural aspects of language, because there must be there's maybe some stumbling blocks for students. So say for someone that's having to study English for immigration, but they're immigrating from a war-torn country that was war-torn, or because of foreign policies from English-speaking countries like America, like the UK, and they're having to kind of adopt almost cultural language to be able to fit in there, or to move to a different country, or to communicate internationally. There's got to be some sort of, but that there could be conflict within learning then as well. I think maybe it's a bit of a stretch what I'm going through, but what I'm saying.
No, that's the argument that they make when I was talking before about how the international English should be owned by the non-natives.
Yeah.
That's what they say. So what you're talking about something that's more a language that's more synthetic and rule based, rather than one that's kind of natural and has evolved. And the idea is that the standard for so-called international English should be based on that. So this is where they'll say stuff like, we should just drop the third person S for international English. So no matter whether it's he, she, it, they, I, or you, the following verb should just be the infinitive. He go to the park.
Yeah.
Right? And this is the kind of thing that they argue for, because it makes more sense.
Yeah,
There's
it does.
no reason to have the third person S.
But
There's a lot of arguments against it. Not least of all that it won't be too long after that standardization that the language starts to dissipate and evolve anyway.
yeah,
If it ever reaches that point of standardization. Standardization is always synthetic. You're always trying to put, whenever you say that this is right and this is wrong, you're always trying to put something on there which isn't necessarily the case. Do you remember there was an expression that started popping up about 20 years ago in America, I think mainly, which is something like, this is a cakewalk. And it's an amalgamation of a piece of cake and a walk in the park. And people started saying this is a cakewalk, right?
yeah.
And I remember looking that up in the dictionary and it said erroneous.
Oh, really?
You look it up in the dictionary now and it says cakewalk, and it's an expression, right? So at what
It
point
doesn't
does
make
someone
any
go
sense.
from being, this is a cake, it's a cakewalk.
Yeah,
This is going to be a cakewalk. Yeah, we're going to kick the rat, whatever. It's one of those things where at what point does language go from being erroneous to being, well, that's all just, it's all arbitrary about where you draw the line, isn't it?
yeah.
So it's always going to be a
And it's
philosophical
that's a great point. There's no way of stripping the culture out of that. I mean, whatever word you use, if you use someone's a chicken, and you say, if you use chicken, it means the food, the animal, but also, that someone's possibly a coward. But, that's from our background. If you look at someone from a Chinese background, chicken means something very, if you call a person chicken, it doesn't mean they're a coward. It means could be like they're a prostitute or something like that. So, everyone's going to bring their own culture to the language anyway, because even if they're speaking English, they're still going to have representations of whatever noun, adjective, or verb that they're using within their language that they're going to impose upon that. And they might not be aware that it doesn't translate from their language to English. So, what's the point? That's why I say. Yeah, that's what I say. So, what's the point of trying to reform it?
Unless
Unless your name's Rich.
Turn everyone, unless you can turn everyone into a robot, then you can't make languages logical, and you can't get the culture out of the language, and you always need a standard. And no matter how you set that standard, there's going to be people who disagree with it, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be alternative schools of thought on it. It's always going to be like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's always going to be like that. So, yeah, I understand all these arguments about how we should do this, that, and the other in terms of international English, and how we should, or maybe we should make the language more logical. Is there any point in teaching idioms? All that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think we have to also consider that, from my perspective anyway, that language learning and language teaching, it's not just about like a pragmatic installation of a language into someone's brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than that. And I the only thing that I'm particularly aware of when talking about this is I think it does play into the kind of unfortunate cottage industry of backpacker English teachers that language teaching does sort of have. Because when you start mystifying it and saying, oh, well, it's, there are elements of language teaching where it's just socialization. People enjoy the experience, and the teacher is a cultural, all of the things I've said basically. They do sort of play into that, don't they? Because, well, okay, then we can have the backpacker teacher because he can entertain you. He can tell you about, fucking what it's like to grow up in Brighton or whatever. And, and he can, he's a cheeky chappy and the students will love him, or her. But I think, we need standardization of English language teachers to some extent. They do need to bloody do the CELTA, and they do. Maybe that's just because I did it. Once you go through the system, kids, you start propping the system up. But, that is necessary. You need to be good teachers, not just winging it. But I do also really like that sort of those other bonus chunks that come with it, and I'm 100% certain that at least the majority of my students, maybe not all, but at least the majority of my students, they don't come to my classes just for the English. There is an element of, they enjoy it, they like having a chat with Rich, they might learn a little bit about England or English culture, might even just learn about something else, because, I tend to try to choose engaging, kind of interesting topics where you can have a meaty, kind of in and out discussion about something. And, I often learn stuff in those discussions and when preparing the material. And I think, that's all part of it for me. It's not just about putting a language chip in someone's brain and upgrading them from A2 to B1 or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think what we have here is the need for people to be more self-aware with what they want from learning English. Do they want to learn English, or do they actually just want to socialize? Do they want to learn English, or do they want to just get some sort of validation? Do they want to learn English, or do they just want some entertainment? Do they want both? Do they want a combination of all these things, and then being aware of that enough for you to enter into the market and go, this is what matches what I want, and there to be no judgment on that. If someone wants to I'm going to take 10 years and I'm going to, just go to this entertaining class that I have and learn English, but also, I get to learn a bit of the culture, that's fine. Then if someone wants to take it more seriously and fast track it, they do a different class or a different school. But it does really depend on, these businesses and schools marketing and, actually delivering the products that they say that they are going to do. Because it's an industry, folks. It's an English language teaching industry. And
yeah,
we're
pragmatically.
trying to... Yeah.
When you look at it like that from a sort of top-down perspective, it's true that they would be, because they'll be steering their teachers to be a certain way. So it might
Or
is
they
more
selecting
sort of-
teachers that they
Right.
want rather
And
than
that as well.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. And to that extent, then.
But it needs everyone
but
to
you
be
might see
truthful and aware of what they are receiving, taking, giving, and everyone to be open about that and without judgment.
Right. Yeah, but I would also say, from an individual teacher's level, it's not necessarily a trade-off.
Yeah.
Like the thing is, whatever level you are, whatever understanding of pedagogy and language teaching that you have, and whatever style you've developed, such as the Silent Way by Donald Cherry. Don, bro, you haven't replied to my email yet. I'm waiting. Anyway, so we're gonna have Don Cherry on soon. Maybe if he replies to if he's still alive. Are you still alive, Professor Don? Pretty much forgot my point now. But it was something to do with, oh yeah, that's it. Whatever your level of kind of understanding of pedagogy is, like you can bring culture into it, and you can bring fun and excitement and bits and bobs into the classroom.
Yeah.
And I don't think you necessarily lose anything. This is, and I think there was too much of a push against it with the wrong people. That's the thing. I understand the kind of looking down a bit on someone who doesn't try to better themselves as a teacher, and talking about the cottage language industry and the backpacker teacher. But when you've actually got people who care, who are going to an inset training session and who are trying to better themselves as a teacher, then I don't think you need to harp on about there being too much TTT, right?
Yeah.
And this is like the idea where Jamie Kelly came back and said, it's not TTT, it's TTQ, right? It's teacher talk quality. What are they doing with the teacher talk? It's not the amount, but measuring it quantitatively doesn't make any sense. You know what you're doing with teacher talk, and it can be great. I mean, in the classes that I have at the moment, where they're one-to-one, there's no way you could even talk about teacher talking time, because I'm talking all the time, and it's one-to-one on an online thing, right?
Yeah.
So talking about it, and again, it goes back to that thing: is the teacher as a resource, the teacher as a cultural thing, the teacher as an object of interest for the students. Sorry to objectify you teachers, but it's true. They do like the dancing monkey to come in, so you come in wearing your silly hat. I always used to do that. I always used to play with my characteristics when I was caricaturistic. I always used to play to the kind of eccentric sides of my personality when I was at the summer school.
Yeah.
Because summer school was kind of that environment, and the kids love that. You come in with a silly hat, or you have the guitar one day, or whatever, and it becomes an object of interest and a way of getting the engagement. Anyway, that's the massive rant about that. There's a lot to be said for it, I think, and I would definitely like to develop those thoughts further as well in some of our upcoming interviews.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what kind of the masterminds, like such as the Don, think. Do you think it'd be so awesome if he watches this before he comes on? And then he comes on and he's like, "Can you call me the Don all the time?" The Don. What does the Don do?
Yeah, I think definitely he should lean into that as a brand. The Don of the Silent Way. It kind of sounds like a Batman versus Superman movie, Dawn of Justice. The Dawn of the Silent Way, the beginning, the dawn. I like it. Come on, Don. Come on, Mr. Cherry, Professor Cherry, because we're gonna set you on the path to international stardom in a silent way.
Really, he's gonna say. He's
yeah.
gonna get us to that 1 million.
No, not us. Him. He deserves it.
Sorry.
He's going to be the Charlie Chaplin of the language teaching world. But we are running out of time, so we won't be looking at these other sketches of Russian teachers that we have. However, if it's going to pull me away with like one of those cane, like the old movies. But if you're wanting to watch that, watch us actually watch these Russian sketches and viral videos, leave a message below, leave a comment below, like, subscribe, because we were so looking forward to it. And if you have any thoughts on what we've discussed just now, maybe you're a non-native English speaking teacher.
It's like our whole audience.
It could be. It could be. Or you're just an English language learning student. What are your thoughts? We really want to. We actually care. We learn, and it gives us ideas for future videos. And when you share it as well, other people see it, and when other people see it, they will talk about it, and we can have a whole world discussion. Heal the world, make it a better place. Where's the guitar, Rich?
It's over there. I don't want to ruin my fake background. See what's all over my floor.
Okay, so we're going to be signing off, but before I do that, please remember to check out teamteacherchina.com, where we have a whole bunch of PowerPoints, lessons and games and such like that you can download for free and use in your classroom, especially if you've got large public school classrooms, 50 plus. They're great for that. We have a corresponding YouTube channel, Team Teacher China, where we go over those lessons, and also Life in China. Team Teacher English, where those lessons are put into video forms that you can give as homework, or have your kids as homeschool kind of learn a bit of English in a play, pause, and practice kind of way. We're trying to coin that. And then we have Team Teacher Baby, where it's me on my parenting journey, and I'm using my skills as a teacher to kind of like put him to the moon. The baby's going to the moon. Maybe
baby
literally.
How much for baby stonks?
Baby stonks, I don't know.
Stonks in baby.
But he's just giving me an idea to copy Pink Fong. International success. Baby stonks. Daddy stonks.
Okay. So,
And then Crispy Chris.
Crispy Chris, crispychris.com, crispychris@gmail.com. That's probably a real person. Do not email crispychris@gmail.com. That's not me. You can get me at Big Daddy-O. No, it's youtube.com/ProfessorRich. Prof Rich Gaming, youtube.com. Do a search, Prof Rich Gaming. BritishPlease.com, where you can, at some point.
Sounds like a 1950s sitcom, like Mind Your
Please.
Language.
It is.
British, please.
BritishPlease.com, where you can read my proposal for a 1940s British sitcom.
I just feel like people, like tourists are coming into your shop, and they're all like speaking different languages, and you're just stood there going, I don't understand this. British, please, and then it fades out.
Yep, that's the brand. That is the brand. So when you go in somewhere and you've been taught some English, and you say, hello, can I get a burger? And they go, British, please. If you ever have that situation, BritishPlease.com will sort you out.
Love it. Okay, you got any final thoughts or comments?
Nope. Jamie Keddy's coming on.
Oh.
Mind you, maybe this podcast will come out like after that one, and then it won't make it. Jamie Keddy's already been on. Check the channel, folks.
Oh my God! What year is this? Who's the president?
The Keds.
British, please.
I just made that one up. British, please.
Okay, so ketamine is going to be on shortly.
I just found that one.
So pay attention, because we're going to get you hooked up to the KED. Okay, well, signing off. Always a pleasure. Like, subscribe, comment, share with your mom. Bye bye.